Hello, my name's Elizabeth Creamer, and I want to share an awful experience that I encountered with you. I remember when I was about 17 years old, and at that time, I was still living with my parents. And it was a Saturday morning in the summer, and I got up and I felt like I wanted to go exercise. So I got out of bed, and I let my mom know that I was going to go exercise, which was very near to my house. So I left my house and looked both ways and crossed the street. And I arrived at the place where I was going to exercise. So when I got there, I stretched and then I started to run. I ran around the football field and I was running, running, running. I ran about 4 laps, and after that I felt good and I decided that I was ready to go back home. So I walked up a hill and then got up to the street, again looked both ways and crossed. And I noticed that my dad was sitting on the porch enjoying his morning, watching people walk by and cars drive on by. So I was walking up to the house and my dad's like, "Oh, do you mind moving my car for me to the front of the house?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, that's fine." I grabbed the keys and walked to the car, which it was only like a block that I had to drive. So I got into my dad's car, shut the door, started the engine, and started to back out. But really all I had to do was just a small little circle. But remember, I'm 17, so I was very eager to drive. So I was going to take the long way. So I looked and I was good to go, and so it was a green light. I was driving. And then it turned green. And so I proceeded, and then it turned red, and then I stopped and waited, and then another green light, and I took a right, and then I had to take another right, and right when I took the right-hand turn, I ran into a parked car. And instantly I was like, "Oh my God, what do I do?" And started sweating. I was like, "Oh my God, my dad's gonna yell at me." And so I decided to back up, but when I backed up, I backed into another parked car, and I was like, "Oh shit." And I looked behind me and there was a woman in the car with her hands up screaming, and luckily she decided to back up and take off. So I pulled over to check and see if there was any damages on the car, and I saw that there was no damage, just a little scratch. So I became relieved, got back in the car, and was going to take off. And I started driving, and all of a sudden I saw a cop car with its lights on. I was like, "Oh my God, I've never experienced a car accident or a cop or anything." So I was curious, maybe the cop saw the accident. So I pulled over and waited for the cop to approach the car, and he started talking. And I signaled to him that I was deaf and I couldn't hear. So he signaled this with his hand for my license. And I told him I didn't have it. I was at home, which was close nearby. And the cop said that he would follow me to my house. So I became very nervous. I said, "Oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to tell my dad?" So the cop turned off his lights for me, which I was thankful for, so people weren't staring at me to make me feel embarrassed. So 2 blocks from there, we drove back to my house. Again, the cop turned his lights on. My dad was sitting on the porch, and then he saw us, and he's like, "Oh my God, what's up? What happened?" So he came down, and I became very nervous and sweating again. And the police came walking up. I'm actually really lucky because my dad knows the cop and they're friends. So I became a little less nervous, and I was hoping that they would forgive me and figure out the situation. So the police officer told my dad that I had no license, no registration, nothing with me. And he said that he saw me approaching the house and just gave me the keys to move the car real quick. And that it was really his fault because I didn't go into the house and grab my license and registration. So it was on him. So the cop said, "That's fine, but make sure next time that your daughter brings her license, her registration, and all that at all time." My dad said yes. So I was kind of puzzled on why the cop never mentioned anything about the car accident or anything like that. He just got back into his car and drove away. So he might not have saw what had happened, which I became very relieved. So I looked around the car and there was no damage, and my dad said to me, I should have told you to get your license and registration. It's my fault that that happened to you. And he went back in the house. So really, I'm never going to forget that experience. My dad actually never knew that happened to his car, that I bumped into another car. It was an awful experience.